Thank you for joining me in part three of a history of Manitowoc's Evergreen Cemetery. In today's tour of Evergreen Cemetery, we will be looking at the Communications Tower and the Steps to Nowhere, the New City Tree Nursery, and the Dow Chapel. We will also discuss two heroes of the Korean War. So let's be on our way to the Communications Tower. Nestled next to the old chapel is a structure that's difficult to miss, yet, because it's surrounded on three sides by an 8-foot fence, it can be easily missed if you don't look up as you pass by it. It's the city's 140-foot communication tower. It was built a number of years ago to help the city fire and police department in its need for better communications. The location of the tower is quite obvious. Number one, it's built on city property, so the city didn't have to purchase additional land for the tower. And second, its location in Evergreen Cemetery is one of the highest points in the city. While the tower was originally built for the city fire and police department, the tower has multiple users, which I'm sure help pay for the tower and the ongoing maintenance, as the tower does require periodic maintenance. To the rear of the tower, facing south, is a rather large, attractive concrete block and wood building, in which all the electrical controls and wiring for the tower are located. In looking over this building, it's evident that its upper level was constructed to match the design of the old chapel, which it sits next to. The 8-foot fence, which surrounds the tower on three sides, is not there for aesthetic value. It's there because the law requires a fence of that height to keep the people from just wandering in. I'm sure it takes a large amount of electricity to operate the many antennas and other devices attached to the upper part of the tower. Speaking of the top of the 140-foot tower, another item that's required by law is a beacon to light and ward off any aircraft flying in the area. The next time you're in Evergreen Cemetery, take a good look for the tower. If you still have difficulty finding it, try entering this into your cell phone. Latitude 44 period 1011, longitude 87 period 671389. Good luck. Our next adventure takes us to the steps to nowhere. So, boys and girls, hold on to your skivvies, for we're about to take a bouncy ride. In recent times, the purpose of the 42 hand laid stone steps was a mystery. That was until I came across an article describing the steps and the reason the city paid to have them installed. The steps, which are difficult to locate unless you have a general knowledge of their location, are found at the southwest corner of the cemetery, almost to the rear. They were laid in late 1938 and into the spring of 1939 by employees of the cemetery under the direction of Cemetery Superintendent Edward Passwalk. Their purpose was quite simple: safety. Safety of the persons taking a shortcut around the back lower west side of the cemetery. For years, walkers that wanted to enter or exit the cemetery on the back southwest side had been forced to climb up or down a steep bank that rose from the Chicago Northwestern Railroad tracks. Their trip up and down the extremely steep slope was dangerous and probably resulted in injuries over time. The city finally heard their complaints in 1938 and started the process of installing steps. When completed, the crew removed a number of old trees and fallen limbs and then planted grass on both sides of the new steps. Strangely, using the steps required walking the railroad tracks from or to Revere Drive, sometimes at night. This was probably more dangerous than climbing the hill before the steps were installed. It was reported over time that part of the steps were made of old discarded gravestones. I cannot confirm or deny this was the case, but I did examine each of the 42 steps. I did not observe anything that might have been a gravestone, but some of the steps are 3 layers thick, and it's possible some gravestones might have been used as fill under the top steps. Today, trees and brush have taken over the once neatly planted grass that once covered the hill, but the steps can still be used if one does not mind climbing through dense brush at the bottom before getting to a gravel road to exit the area. If sometime you have occasion to visit Evergreen Cemetery and want to take a trip into history, try finding the steps and climb them up and down, but be very, very careful as some of the stones are loose. So, what does a dog or some other type of pet on a gravestone indicate? A dog or pet on a gravestone symbolize unconditional love, enduring companionship, and a deep emotional bond with the beloved animal, serving as a tangible tribute to their memory and the joy they brought to an owner's life. These memorials offer a place for remembrance, help with the grieving process by providing a sense of closure, and create a lasting legacy that honors the pet's impact on the family. So, what do shaking hands or clasped hands on a gravestone symbolize? They symbolize a farewell to earthly life and an eternal bond with God or loved ones. The gesture can represent the deceased's final goodbye, reunion in the afterlife, or a devoted marital relationship, depending on the specific design of the hands and wrists. Continuing our study of servicemen who gave the ultimate sacrifice, we come to the Korean War. Our first serviceman is Corporal Thomas William Duffy. Thomas was born May 4th, 1930, in Manitowoc, the son of Frank and Mary Duffy. In 1942, Thomas's father passed away from illness, leaving his wife to support their three young sons. He attended Holy Innocents Catholic grade school on Manitowoc's north side and then Lincoln High School. In high school, Thomas was a member of the National Honor Society, Student Council, and Lincoln track team. Just 4 months after graduation from Lincoln High School in 1948, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. Thomas received his basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, after which he was immediately sent to Sindal, Japan, where he attended medical school to become a medic. After completing his medical training, he was sent to Korea, where he became a member of the 7th Reconnaissance Company of the 7th Infantry Division. Shortly after his arrival, he and his unit were involved in the capture of Pusan Air Base. In February 1951, the 7th Infantry was committed to combat operations in the Central Theater of the Korean War. On February 13th, 1951, Corporal Duffy was riding in a jeep transporting three wounded soldiers to an aid station, and while attending the most seriously wounded soldier, the jeep was hit by enemy artillery or mortar fire. Thomas and two of the wounded soldiers were killed instantly. For whatever reason, the military listed Duffy as missing in action for the next 2 months. It was not until April 24th that the military notified Mrs. Duffy that it was confirmed that her son had been killed in action. It would be another 5 months before his body was returned to Manitowoc for burial. That took place on September 24th, 1951. The funeral took place at Sacred Heart Catholic Church and followed by burial in Evergreen Cemetery. Auto O's Post 659 of the Veterans of Foreign Wars conducted military rites at graveside. Sometime fate can be fickle. We just discussed the military service of Thomas William Duffy, who was killed in action on February 13th, 1951. We now review the military history of Glenn Robert Owen. PFC Owen would die in battle on February 14th, 1951, less than 24 hours after Thomas Duffy. The two men served in different units and were in different parts of Korea at the time of their death. Both young men had grown up on Manitowoc's north side, and while they attended different schools, it was more than likely they knew each other before they entered into the U.S. Army. This is not the first time this has happened to servicemen from Manitowoc. During World War II, two young men, Eugene Schramm and Francis Wagner, died in battle on Peleliu Island on the same day, September 28, 1944. Both men had attended Lincoln High School and graduated in the same year. They entered service on different dates and were assigned to different units. They were at different locations on Peleliu Island at the time of their death, yet fate managed to take the two classmates on the same day. Glenn Robert Owen was born in Manitowoc on October 7, 1932, to Robert and Ella Owen, the third of six children. He was baptized by Reverend August Barnland of St. Paul United Methodist Church on North 7th Street the following November. Just 4 years after his birth, Glenn's father was killed in a traffic accident on Highway 10 near Cato. This left Ella Owen alone to raise her six children. This was done with the help of St. Paul congregation, as the Owen family lived just one block from the church. They made sure the children attended weekly Sunday school, Sunday services, and other church activities. For his part, Glenn attended Woodrow Wilson Junior High School and then Manitowoc Vocational School for specialized training. On April 24th, 1950, at the age of 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. After completing basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas, and paratrooper training at Fort Benning, Georgia, Glenn was assigned to the 11th Airborne Division, 187th Airborne Infantry Regiment, 2nd Battalion, Company E. The 187th Airborne Infantry Regiment was known by the nickname of the Rakkasans, which means falling umbrella. On October 7, 1950, the 11th Armored Division was shipped out for the war in Korea. While in Korea, the 187th was involved in several minor battles. That was until February 14, 1951, when the unit was called on to take a hill occupied by a large force of Chinese troops. The hill, known only as Hill 255, overlooked the large city of Wojan, Korea, and gave the Chinese army an unobstructed view of the entire area. It took three charges up Hill 255 to drive the Chinese from the top. The Chinese continued to fire as they retreated down the backside of the hill. One of these rounds struck Glenn Owen, who was in the lead element of the third charge. That round would take the life of Private Owens within minutes. It would take a week before Ella Owens received the telegram from the Army notifying her of the death of her son. Not only Mrs. Owen, but the entire congregation of St. Paul Methodist Church were devastated by the news of Glenn's death. They had known the young man since his birth and had come to know and love him. At the time, many U.S. soldiers were dying in Korea, so the military did not take the time in a telegram to discuss how a soldier was killed in action. So Ella Owen had no idea of how her son had died. That was until September 26, 1951, when she received word that she would be visited by several officers from the military to receive a award presented posthumously to her son. The award was presented to her 3 days later when she received her son's Silver Star, the Army's third highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy. A photo and description of the event stated Lieutenant Colonel Peter Birmingham of Oshkosh hands the Silver Star Award posthumously to PFC Glenn R. Owen, to the soldier's mother, Mrs. Ella Owen. 417 North 6th Street. Holding the Silver Star citation at far right is Major Alfred C. Shillem, also of Oshkosh, while Reverend Alan McCall, pastor of St. Paul Methodist Church, looks on. Major Shillem holds a framed picture of the 18-year-old paratrooper who died in Korea on February 14th as his unit stormed a hill near Wujan. The citation for the Silver Star reads as follows: PFC On was killed on February 14th in the midst of a bloody battle for Hill 255, which controlled the high ground overlooking Wujan. 3 times his unit, the 1st Platoon of Company E of the 187th Airborne Infantry Regiment, stormed the steep hill in the face of rifle, machine gun, mortar, and hand grenade fire, and before it was taken, PFC On and his fellow paratroopers were compelled to cover 400 yards of exposed terrain up the crest of Hill 255. The third assault brought the American soldiers into a savage hand to hand battle with the enemy, who outnumbered them many times, but they would not be denied. After the objective was taken, a total of 451 communist dead were found at the scene. Soon after the goal had been reached, PFC On was picked off by enemy fire. The gallantry displayed by Private On on this occasion reflects great credit upon himself and was in the keeping with the highest traditions of military service. The U.S. Army awarding the medal to the 18-year-old Manitowoc GI lauded him because he demonstrated a rare courage and inspiring example of heroism throughout the savage engagement. Just a note to add to this: for their actions during this battle, the 187th Airborne Infantry Regiment received the Presidential Unit Citation, the nation's highest award a military unit can receive for their actions in battle. It would take several additional months before Glenn's body was returned to Manitowoc from Korea. His services were held at St. Paul Methodist Church, where he was baptized just 18 years before. The church service was conducted by Reverend Ellen McCall, with graveside military rights provided by Manitowoc veterans groups. Glenn Owens is buried in plot H83, Evergreen Cemetery, Manitowoc, next to his mother and father. So, what is the meaning of a scroll topped with a flower? A gravestone featuring a scroll topped with a flower combines two distinct symbols, suggesting a meaning related to a person's life, mortality, or age at death. The scroll often symbolizes the book of life or the unfolding of time and a person's life story, with both ends of the scroll being rolled up, indicate that the past and the future are hidden. The flower is a common cemetery symbol and generally represents love, beauty, and hope of life or the flourishing of the soul. How about a young girl holding a drooping flower? This image shows a life cut short, where the wilting flower in her hand represents her body, and a bird taking flight nearby symbolizes her soul ascending to heaven. No doubt, things in the cemetery are always changing. Sometimes things are added, and sometimes they are no longer needed and are taken away. I found this to be the case the other day as I was walking in the cemetery. At the very south end of the cemetery, I found a work in process. The road on both ends of this work was blocked off so motorists could not drive through. A trench had been dug directly into the road, and I could see that a new water pipe had been laid where one had not been before. Then I spotted a large area, a square to be exact, had been dug out close to the water pipe. The large square was dug deeper on three sides, and I could see that footings were to be added in the deep area. Of course, I assumed that some type of new building was to be added there after the footings were installed. As I continued my walk, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of new building was to be added at that location. Finally, my curiosity got the best of me. Shortly after, I came across the head of the cemetery maintenance crew hard at work. I casually asked him what was going in at the back of the cemetery. He responded by saying it was to be the new city tree nursery. He said young trees, saplings to be exact, of different types will be planted there, and when the right size will be replanted in the cemetery and other locations within the city, such as city parks. The footings will define the area where the saplings are to be planted, and once the footings settle, good ground for tree growth will fill in the area. As stated earlier, the new nursery is located at the very south end of the cemetery and just above the old Chicago Northwestern Railroad tracks. This area would never be used for burials and was determined to be an excellent area for the new nursery. Now, this is not the first nursery to be installed in the cemetery. A much smaller tree nursery was started several years ago on the very south end of the cemetery just before the big drop off. This nursery was installed because of the large number of ash trees that have died and been removed from the cemetery. The replanting of these young trees is an ongoing process, and if the city had to purchase all these trees from a nursery in the city, it would be a huge expense. I should also mention that the city of Manitowoc has a marvelous program called Memorial Tree Program. The program allows you to purchase any one of 9 different types of trees and have them planted at Evergreen Cemetery or a city park in memory of a loved one. A group I belong to, the Manitowoc County Civil War Roundtable, has purchased 5 ivory silk Japanese lilac trees in the past couple of years in memory of all Civil War veterans. If you are interested in this program, contact the City of Manitowoc for more information. This concludes part 3 of our tour of Evergreen Cemetery. I want to thank you for joining me on this adventure. I will shortly be adding part 4 as we continue a tour of this beautiful cemetery. I hope you will join me at that time. Thank you.